Today, we're going to be talking about the stem changing verbs in the preterite tense or in the past tense. Before we do that, let's just do a quick review of our endings that we need to conjugate verbs in the preterite tense. As we know, in Spanish, we have verbs that end in AR, verbs that end in ER, and verbs that end in IR. Example, hablar, to speak, comer, to eat, vivir, to live. And so, in order for us to conjugate and transform these verbs and put them in the past tense, we will take what comes before the ending. In this case, for hablar, what comes before the AR ending is habl. As you can see here, it's in black. Habl. And then we will just apply to it the appropriate ending. For example, for yo, we would need to add the E with an accent, and that would be I spoke. For tú hablaste, you spoke. Usted, that's the formal you. Él, he, or ella, she, habló. She spoke, he spoke, you spoke. Using usted, of course. Hablamos, we spoke. Hablasteis, you all spoke. You would use this form if you're in Spain. Ustedes, you all. And then ellos, they, hablaron, they spoke. Okay? So we would do the same thing with comer. Now notice that the endings for ER and IR are the same. Iste, yo, imos, isteis, hicieron. Okay? So by now you should know these endings because you will need them. And if you don't know them yet, make sure that you have them handy. Copy them, put them on a page, because every chapter, if you have noticed, we're using this tense in every single chapter. Okay? So for comer, we would do the same thing. We would just take this stem and then apply the appropriate endings to conjugate in the past. Comí, I ate. Comiste, you ate, and so on. Vivir, same mechanics. We would take the stem and we would add these endings. Viví, viviste, vivió. I lived, you lived, and so on. Okay? So that's all we have done until now to conjugate verbs in the past tense. We have just applied the endings that you see here in red. However, if we go back to the present tense for a minute, remember that we had something that we called stem changing verbs. And that means that when we had stem changing verbs, we would apply the appropriate endings, but then also we would change something in the stem. We would change that vowel in the stem everywhere except for nosotros and vosotros. What changed? A letter in the stem. An example would be preferir. That E in the stem of preferir would change to IE. And we had some that changed from E to I, and then we had another group where the vowel changed from O to U. So here on page 129, we had a list of verbs that changed their stem from E to IE and O to UE. And then you had some that changed the stem from E to I. So for example, pedir, the stem changed from PED to an I. It changed it everywhere except for nosotros and vosotros. So the question is, what happens now in the preterite tense? Do we have stem changing verbs? And do they change everywhere? And what exactly changes? Okay, so first thing to know is that from that list of stem changing verbs that we just saw on the pages that I showed, any verbs that end in AR and ER that were in the stem changing groups, we don't have to worry about those in the preterite tense. From the groups that we just saw, if there were some verbs that ended in IR, then those do have a stem change. And I'll show you what that change is in a minute. I repeat, only IR ending stem changing verbs will change their stem. Looking at these two, pedir ends in IR and it was in our list of stem changing verbs. So this one is going to change the stem. Dormir. This also was in our list of stem changing verbs and it ends in IR. So if we conjugate these two in the preterite tense, we will need to change the stem. Where exactly? So as you can tell, I conjugated pedir, to ask or to request, and dormir, to sleep. I conjugated it for almost every one of the subject pronouns. What did I leave blank? This third person singular. Usted, él, ella. I left it blank because that's where the stem is going to change. In the plural ones, I also left it blank in ustedes, ellos, ellas, which is the third person plural. So that's where the stem will change. Now let's take a look at our stem. The stem is anything that comes before the ending. So in this case, it's PED. And you can see everywhere, it's just PED. However, where you see blank, that's where it's going to change. And it is going to change from an E to an I. Pidió. And in this case, it's going to change from an O to a U. Durmió. Whereas normally we would just automatically think, oh, it's a pedió. No, it's going to change to an I. Pidió. In the third person plural, pidieron, durmieron. This changes also. Okay, so again, I repeat, the only ones that you will need to worry about are the ones that end in IR and where in our list of stem changing verbs in the present tense. Okay? What is going to be the change? The vowel in the stem is going to change from an E to an I or from an O to a U. Where is it going to change? In the third person singular or the third person plural. What's the third person singular? Usted, él, ella. What's the third person plural? Ustedes, ellos, ellas. Example. Preferir. In the present tense, it was él prefiere. It changed to an IE. This is different in the past. In the preterite, the E is only going to change to I. In the preterite, there is no change to IE. Always E to I or O to U. Again, where? Third person singular, third person plural. So therefore, in the past tense, él prefirió. But wait, preferir has two E's in the stem. Which one do I change? I always change the one that is closest to the ending. So the one that changed was the second E. Él prefirió. Mentir. Ellos mienten, that was in the present tense. And in the past tense, it would be ellos mintieron. From an E to an I. So go ahead and you try to do this example. I'm giving you two verbs, servir, to serve, and morir, to die. And I already gave you the endings. So the only thing that you need to change is the stem. So go ahead and try to do this one. All right, so hopefully you said this E is going to change to an I and this O is going to change to a U. That is the stem change that we need to worry about. E to I and O to U. Where? Third person, singular and third person plural. To summarize, you need to worry about only the stem changing verbs that end in IR. If they were stem changing in the present tense and they ended in IR, those are the ones that are going to change in the past tense. What's the change? E to I or O to U somewhere in the stem. Where? Third person singular, third person plural. Let me know if you have any questions. If you learned something new, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. Adiós amigos, sigan estudiando, les mando un abrazo y hasta la próxima. Adiós.